My next guest is Madsen, an American journalist, author, and columnist specializing in intelligence and international affairs. Good evening, sir.
Hello, how are you?
I'm all right. Thank you for joining us. Now, why I actually asked you to come onto the show is one of our listeners sent me a link to an article you wrote on voternet.org, and the title says, Israel's secret plan for a second Israel in Ukraine. Now, you know, I'm quite used to shocking articles from you, but what's going on? Why do you think that this plan is actually on its way?
Well, there's an awful lot of history here, and unfortunately, there are certain quarters that do not want the history told of, why is Ukraine such a huge prize for several, powers, the EU, Russia, the United States, and others. And you look back you'd have to go all the way back to between the 7th and 10th centuries, when there was a battle for control over what is now Russia and Ukraine and the Black Sea and the Crimean Peninsula between Byzantium, which was its capital was in Constantinople, and Byzantium, as the heir to the Roman Empire, wanted to extend Christianity through that region, and they were successfully they got what the group known as the Kievan Rus, what is now modern-day Russia, to convert to Christianity. They didn't have that much success with another empire that fought not only the Kievan Rus, but also they fought against Genghis Khan's Mongols for control, and that was the Khazars. And the Khazar Empire.
Hello? Wayne.
Basically ruled from Ukraine. Yes.
Yeah, I lost you for a second. So.
Oh, okay. I was saying that the Khazarian Empire ruled from what is it's now Ukraine all the way down in the southern Caucasus and the Crimean Peninsula. It was quite a large empire, but the ruler of the Khazars decided not to order his people to become Christians, nor did he want them to become Muslims. He agreed because of the Jewish missionaries coming to his empire that he would convert his population to Judaism. And it's from this group, this ancient empire, that we saw the diaspora go into Eastern Europe, Central Europe, and therefore the people who claim that they have a God-given right to the land of Israel aren't even from Israel. They have
you mean now Palestine?
Palestine,
yeah.
Right? So this is the essence of the problem. Now, the Times of Israel published this article. Now, I have to say that the article was done in a satirical form, but in present-day Israel, it's very hard to publish a critical analysis of the Khazars without running the risk of even violence from some of these really far-right elements in Israel. So there were two books written about the Khazars, one by the Israeli historian Shlomo Sand, which basically said that the Israeli people who are from Europe are an invented people, that they were actually Khazars. And they had no lineage going back to the Middle East, and basically the original Israelites are the present-day Palestinians. And another one was written some years ago by Arthur Kessler called the 13th Tribe. And the article in the Times of Israel cited these two books. But sometimes through satire you get the news. And here in the United States, of course, many people get their news from two comedy shows. One is hosted by Jon Stewart, and the other one by Stephen Colbert. So it's not unusual to actually see news come that's missed by the major media come through
Well,
comedy and satire.
we used to do it here in our country or in the Eastern Bloc during the communist regime, because there was no other way to get it out.
Yes. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because we have the same situation here in the United States now.
I know, I know.
with people going to get their news, and they actually, I have to say, in some cases, they're more informed by the Jon Stewart's, the comedy show, and the Stephen Colbert show than they are from the daily drivel they get from the major news networks. All
right, now, so. Do you think they are trying to claim back the land that they came from about 1,000 years ago?
Yes. Well, if you look at the what Israel's doing today, it's clear that they are not satisfied with remaining in their present borders. Well, the whole issue of claiming ownership over the West Bank points that out. Also, they pretty much have annexed the Golan Heights. There have been a lot of reports of collaboration between Israel and the Islamic State, ISIL, Islamic State for Iraq and the Levant, and that one of the deals is that if this group overthrows Assad, that they will basically, Syria will give the Golan Heights without any argument to the Israelis. So that there have been many reports about that collaboration. And also Israeli designs in northern Iraq, which Israelis view as the land of the many Jewish prophets, Ezra and Nehemiah and others. There have been cases where wealthy Israelis have gone into what is now Iraqi Kurdistan and have bought property, land, and obviously they say it's to protect Jewish holy shrines, but we know that once we just look at the West Bank, when settlements start to show up, it's very rare they will leave those settlements. As a matter of fact, they expand from those settlements in basically a colonization process. And now we have this interesting facet of many of the leading Ukrainian government officials, including the governor of one of the eastern provinces in the Donbass region, Ihor Kolomoisky. He's, I think, the third wealthiest man in Ukraine. He's also a dual Ukrainian-Israeli citizen, and he's made no bones about the fact that he is looking to pursue a sort of neo-Khazarian nationalism in Ukraine. And,
I would like to ask you, you know, for us it's quite out of this world, the whole new Ukrainian government being, foreigners. But how many of those, did you count them, how many of those are Khazars?
Well, it's interesting. When you look at the Khazars, many of them over the years have, of course, they moved from what was Khazaria to Poland, Germany, Romania, Bulgaria, and other countries in Eastern and Central Europe. And so you could look at basically at all of the Ukrainian Jewish population, including those who emigrated to Israel, many of which are living illegally in the West Bank, as Khazarians. That is their lineage. And basically their original homeland, because let's face it, it's a very nice place to live, was the Crimean Peninsula. Now later, the Crimean Peninsula was taken over by the Tatars, and many of them are Muslim today. Many of them were forced out of Crimea by Joseph Stalin. So we actually there's a republic in central Russia called the Republic of Tatarstan. It's basically, I understand it's about 60% Muslim and 40% Christian, but there was a lot of intermarriage there, so some Tatars also claim Khazarian lineage. So these people are spread around Central Eastern Europe, and now because of the immigration to Israel and the West Bank, many of them are found in Israel today. All
right, now. do you think, or well, according to your article, do you think that the whole thing in Ukraine has been planned?
Oh, I think definitely. We know that Victoria Nuland, who is the Assistant Secretary of State for Eastern European and Eurasian Affairs, and by the way, her actual name is Noodleman. It was changed to Nuland, but she's of Khazar descent, as is Jeffrey Pyatt, the U.S. ambassador in Kiev. And we know that Nuland arranged for $5 billion to be spent, U.S. taxpayer money.
Yeah, she admitted it.
She admitted it.
Yeah.
She admitted it. Absolutely. This is no great state secret, and she's basically bragging about it. And so you have, and then you have her conversations, which were intercepted and recorded with Pyatt, the U.S. ambassador in Kiev, where she got very, very some of her language is not fit for prime time, but she was very clear about the intention of overthrowing the Yanukovych government and replacing it with this government now, which just made as its finance minister
No, I lost you again.
Who arrived at the...
Wayne, I lost you.
Okay. Yes.
Go ahead.
I was saying we have the situation with the current finance minister of Ukraine, an American citizen who arrived at the airport in Kiev to take on her new responsibilities and was handed a Ukrainian passport and Ukrainian citizenship. That's very similar to what happens in Israel when Jews who undergo what's known as the Aliyah return to Israel. They're given an Israeli passport, Israeli citizenship. It's automatic. And you see the same thing playing out now in Ukraine. Another government minister in the Ukrainian government is a Lithuanian Jew who arrived in Kiev and was handed a Ukrainian passport. So Ukraine, they don't even have Ukrainians in key cabinet positions in their government, and that's incredible. And to think that this was all absolutely engineered by Nuland and Pyatt and their co-conspirators in the U.S. government and in the European Union is rather earth-shaking. And so it again points to this ancient, going on for centuries, this idea that many Khazarians want to reestablish their influence and their control. And even in Israel, there's a big split between the Khazarians, who are from basically from Eastern and Central Europe, have no lineage back to the Middle East, and the Sephardic Jews, who many of them came from Spain, from North Africa, and they do have a historical lineage going back to what is now Israel. So there's a big conflict even within Israel between these two groups of people.
Now, I'm not saying I'm confused, but again, the question is, now, is the U.S. or has the U.S. been helping to the Ukrainian, people to actually to get a new government in because they want to be, or your country, do they want to be close to the Russian border so they can influence Russia, or whatever you are saying, that the land is being prepared for the Khazars?
I think both. I think it's hard sometimes to separate the interests of the U.S. government from those of Israel, especially with the clout that they have over our Congress and over our foreign policy. The Israel lobby I'm talking about. And yes, it's to get very close to the Russian border, but also to basically cement in Ukraine as a place, because if you look at the history of organized crime, and they talk about the Russian mafia, well, largely it's not the Russians they're talking about. These are basically, this Russian mafia is Russian, Ukrainian, Jewish mafia, and that is essentially the Khazarians. And even the Mongols centuries ago determined that this warlike group of people, the Khazars, were not good people to deal with. So when you have Genghis Khan's hordes not wanting to deal with them, that says a lot about the trustworthiness, or not so much trustworthiness of the Khazars. They were basically not only feared, but people just did not want to do business with them because of the nature of their dealings. And we see it today with the present mafia.
I have a question here and I was going to ask you this one, but it's good. Peter is asking that my question for Mr. Madsen is, it is well known that there are a lot of fascist activities in the Ukraine. So how do you think these efforts for the second Israel will deal with this problem?
You know, this is interesting because one of the fascist leaders in Ukraine said, they asked him about his group's past identification with anti-Semitism. He says he basically said he is a great admirer of Israel because of the way they deal with the Arabs, the Muslims, essentially. So we see this across Europe now, where these neo-Nazi and neo-fascist movements are saying, well, my enemy right now are the Muslims, or the Arabs, the people, the immigrants, and therefore my newly found friends are those people who also are opposed to the Muslims and the Arabs and the immigrants, and that's the Israelis. So you see this sort of marriage of convenience taking place, not only in Ukraine, but we see it with the National Front in France. We see it with some the Swedish Democrats, the far-right party there, and all across Europe, this sort of alliance between the ideologues who once worshipped Adolf Hitler, who have now embraced Bibi Netanyahu.
Yeah, that's fine, but hasn't it crossed these Khazars' minds that these neo-fascists, historically, they will eventually turn against them?
Well, I wonder if people are thinking that far ahead. It's interesting that Kolomoisky, this tycoon in Ukraine, has basically cobbled together his own mercenary forces into these battalions. One is called the Azov Battalion, and there's other ones. But many of the people who are joining these battalions are either Ukrainian right-wing neo-fascists, or they're mercenaries coming from other parts of Europe, from Germany and Sweden and Estonia and other countries. So whether they understand that eventually, if the neo-fascists take over, they're going to turn their attention away from the Muslims, who they believe they're going to vanquish, and turn it towards the Khazarians and the Jews of Ukraine. I don't think people are looking that far ahead. I think they're looking at winning the wars now, rather than what they could face in the future.
All right. Well, this thing will chase them anyway. Daniel is asking, good evening, Mr. Madsen. I would like to ask you if it's a coincidence that new multicultural members of the Ukrainian government came from the states that apparently have anti-Russian thoughts: Georgia, Lithuania, America, Poland. Have you got any information about the American one? I guess she's the new Minister of Finance.
Yes, she she comes out of this sort of George Soros construct.
Oh, there you go.
And many of these people do. They were, they didn't just wind up, in these positions. They had jobs in Washington and New York where they were financed by these NGOs. We see this across Europe with Soros acolytes, I call them, in power, and for example, president of Estonia. They're in cabinet positions in Poland, and we also should point out that the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Yatsenyuk, who Newland calls Yats, he lived in the United States for an awful long time, and there's some people who believe that he got tied up with the Church of Scientology when he was in the United States, although he hasn't come out and admitted that he grabs a hold of these tin cans and talks to planets and other galaxies, but I don't expect to see a full forthcoming from Mr. Yatsenyuk anytime soon. But yeah, the influence of Americans in the Ukrainian government is astounding, but not surprising considering we had American citizens. As I say, we have a former American citizen as president of Estonia. We had one as the president of Lithuania twice. Served 2 terms. He was actually a former member of U.S. Army intelligence in the 1950s.
There you go.
So it's no surprise. And I see. The one thing I would like to see the U.S. do is we have a law in place called the Logan Act. It's from 1798, and it forbids Americans from engaging in their own foreign policy. And I would like to see that law applied to Mr. Soros. I'd like to see him prosecuted under the Logan Act for violating it, for conducting his own private foreign affairs activities, and I would like to see his people that he has placed in these positions brought up on charges, and just ask them, are you American citizens still? And then, of course, bar them from ever getting any American citizenship back if they go serve in a foreign government.
Listen, he is actually financing a professional revolutionaries all over the world.
Everywhere. And it started with this group, Otpor, in Serbia. And the guy that wrote the handbook on these street demonstrations is a guy named Gene Sharp. He's in Boston, and basically many people believe he actually developed the handbook for these types of rebellions on behalf of the CIA. But he still promotes this idea, and it goes from everything from just innocent street demonstrations to these grotesque displays of nudity done by these groups of women. We hear about where they stage these awful protests in churches and mosques.
Have you just as a curiosity, have you noticed that the Czech president Miloš Zeman, he actually translated the word pussy into Czech on the national radio, and there was a huge backlash against him.
Well,
especially from the U.S. embassy. Well,
yeah,
because Hillary Clinton, she was posing with these girls.
Yes, the Pussy Riot Girls and the Femen group,
Yep.
which is very active in Ukraine. But this is all out of the Gene Sharp playbook, and the money, of course, comes from Mr. Soros. Look, there's nothing wrong with protests, but also there's a little bit of, I think, decency involved. You don't stage these protests inside the holiest cathedral for the Russian Orthodox religion in Moscow, and they've done similar things. They chopped down a cross in Ukraine at one point in time. So.
Push the chicken into certain places, and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the chickens and it's funny they do these things against churches and mosques. I have never seen them conduct themselves this way to synagogues, and there's many, especially ultra-Orthodox Jewish sects are very misogynistic. So why aren't they attracting the attention of these women's rights groups? When you look at who's funding them, and you see Mr. Soros and Gene Sharp and the others, and you can understand why it's hands off, or I should say hands on certain religions and hands off of others.
Yeah, I'll get to some questions from our listeners. Marianne is asking, this information concerning claiming back the long-lost land by Israel is new to me. What I would like to ask is, how large part of land is subject of this claim? Precisely whether it would go even farther over the Russian border? And consequently, what would be the Russian response to this threat?
Well, I think Russia would respond to the threat. Yeah, and will they consign themselves to just Ukraine? Well, there's Ukrainian designs on areas that they claim belong to them a long time ago, even dating back to the time of the Khazars, and we're now talking about the area around Stavropol in Russia. and the other border areas, and also the Caucasus. And but it's not just limited to this area. We see Israeli groups now going around the world and identifying lost, quote-unquote, lost tribes of Israel in Africa, in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, amongst Indians in Brazil, in Mexico, amongst native populations in Mexico, in Nagaland and Mizoram in northeastern India. Even in Afghanistan, there are some Taliban who consider themselves to be the 13th tribe of Israel, a lost tribe of Israel. And there was a active communications when the Taliban ran Afghanistan between the Taliban and the Israelis. There are even parts of Pakistan, which people are saying. So this, and China and in Japan, and even some Israelis have convinced some Koreans that because they are of a Turkic descent, that they too are a lost tribe of Israel. So where do you put the brakes on this proselytizing, which they claim they don't do, but in fact they are, and even to, you know, when Herzl, the Zionist leader, was trying to figure out what place are we going to have as a homeland for the Jewish people, there were other places suggested. One was the island of Madagascar and Patagonia, the region in southern Argentina, and there are still people who believe that there's designs on Patagonia as well. So some people believe that you look at this flag of Israel, you see the star, and then you see the two blue stripes, and that the blue stripes represent the Nile River and the Euphrates River, and that Israel is everything in between. But some would argue that maybe the blue stripes, one represents the Atlantic and the other one the Pacific Ocean, and Israel is everything in between.
Why not just the two shores of the Atlantic Ocean? So from eastern part of the United States back to the western part of Europe and Africa.
California to New York, that would be more likely.
Well, it is now, so no doubt about that. Eve is asking, she's writing to us, "Hi Wayne and Norbert, there is a lot of information in some alternative media that the American government is preparing another false flag operation, big terrorist attack to the USA, more terrible than the 9/11 was. What do you think about this?"
Well, we may be on the verge of one here in the United States, but we just had two that I consider to be false flag operations. One, the storming of the Canadian Parliament. Yep. By this Libyan-Canadian guy who was then killed. Turns out he was nothing more than a street criminal who they said, he embraced Islam at some point in his life, but he also had a record longer than his arm. And the most recent one in Sydney, Australia, where a guy who said he was an Iranian sheikh who had converted from Shia Islam to Sunni Islam, and that's a real leap. Because these two sects do not like one another. Having just been in Iran a few months ago, I can testify to the fact that the Iranians do not like these Takfiri, Salafist, ISIL people. They're fighting them now, and they're actually bombing their positions in Iraq with the permission of the United States. So this guy walks into a coffee shop in Sydney, but it turns out that he had been involved in the murder of his ex-wife. His girlfriend, his current girlfriend, was criminally charged in stabbing the ex-wife and then burning her body. So again, this guy had a record longer than his arm. He was a street criminal. And then they started to accentuate the fact that he was an Iranian immigrant to Australia. But in both cases, the guy in Canada and the recent one in Australia, they have these two criminals who conduct these operations not for Islam, but because they're probably criminally insane. And but it's an easy thing to try to link them to some sort of worldwide terrorist threat, which the media did in both cases, and then they had to actually retrench from those arguments.
So you don't think that there is any imminent threat to the United States these days?
No, I would be surprised if we see anything on the scale of 9/11. I think we're going to see these what the the propagandists call lone wolf attacks, like the one in Canada, the recent one in Sydney, Australia, and I think that's going to keep the fear alive. That where could these happen next? The British government put out the word that there could be more beheadings, like there was of that British soldier on the street of London, where again some local ne'er-do-wells decided to grab him, and there's some questions about that whole thing as well. I think that's what we're going to see, these isolated incidents, but they're going to get all this press attention to make it look like you're not safe when you leave your home. A little bit different psychology than having what occurred on 9/11, which basically traumatized the country for years.
Well, I'll tell you something. You are not safe as long as the United States government is in someone's pocket. Because, well, do the math. How many people died of terrorist attacks, and how many people died of your country bringing democracy somewhere?
Yeah. Yeah, and the drones, can strike at any moment. And many people who've attended wedding parties and funerals from Pakistan to Yemen to Somalia and Sudan have found out that they can be hit by a drone attack at any point in time.
Ivan is claiming Ukrainians hate Jews. They call them Yevreychiks. The same for Russians. Khazars are leaving for Israel. Only elites, oligarchical Jews are staying. Do you think that great mass of Khazars will come back to the Ukraine?
I think when the situation is stabilized, because what Ukraine is looking to do is basically depopulate the Russian-speaking population of eastern Ukraine. Well, that's going to leave a big gap, and I think the thought is, what's better than to have dual citizens returning, people who can live in both Ukraine and Israel, and we have that situation in many countries now. Excuse me, where people go back and forth. They're allowed to have 2 and even 3 passports, and they conduct business in multiple countries, and then they arrange it so they don't have to pay taxes to any of these countries, because they're sort of light-footed when it comes to when the tax man comes around, because of this unique position they have, because of the fact that they can have this dual citizenship with Israel, and they use that to their full advantage, and especially with what I mentioned, this mafia that we see, and for years that mafia was known to be very strong in Odessa, which of course is on the Black Sea in Ukraine.
Another question I wanted to ask you, but it came from our listener. Radovan is asking, excellent program and guest, how do you read, Mr. Madsen, the situation with the Russian currency in confrontation with the US dollar? He's talking about the recent last maybe 12 hours. Yes.
Huge. Well, I think this is just another example of how U.S. control over the banking system can be used as a weapon because of the drop in oil prices, which again, I think this is artificial. Because look at what countries are being hurt. Russia, Venezuela, Ecuador, all countries that the U.S. is at loggerheads with. And I think the 5-watt light bulb went off in somebody's head, either at the CIA or at the World Bank or one of these other organizations. Said, hey, wait a minute, we can accomplish what we're trying to do on the battlefield by just forcing down the price of oil, which is going to hurt these countries that we're opposed to. And we see now the effect of that, not only Russia, but in Venezuela, where the economy is plummeting even further. Now, the Saudis are good friends, and I use that sarcastically. They have enough reserves to weather this storm. and but not so much Russia and the other countries that have already come under sanctions. And of course, President Obama is going to sign his most recent congressional legislation to increase sanctions against Russia and also provide lethal military aid to Ukraine.
All right. Sefarino is asking, Norbert, ask your man about Scientology and our president. Does he think that Kiska is also part of the larger plan? Well, we had a show about Kiska with Wayne, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, my experience is where there's smoke, there's fire. And certainly with Kiska, there was ample evidence that he had dealt closely with friends of his who were, big into Scientology religion. Years ago, a few years ago in Athens, the Greek police raided the Church of Scientology headquarters and found out that the Scientologists planned to create their own country in what is now the Balkans. And it was, I think the name of the country they came up with would be called Bulgaria. And it was going to be a combination of Greece, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, Albania, and maybe another country thrown in there. But this is just, look, you look at the history of Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard that created it, he had all kinds of links to the CIA MK Ultra mind control program. That was a real program. It really existed. The documents are readily available in the CIA archives. You can read them on the internet. But Scientology was just one of these crazy schemes dreamt up by the CIA's operations, technical services operations back in the 1950s. And there, Johnny on the spot was good old L. Ron Hubbard to come out with this crazy made-up religion. And believe me, they use it for their own purposes. You might read a history of where the Scientologists and the CIA battled each other over access to information, but I think that was all just a red herring to make it look like the Scientologists were independent. But it's a very wealthy religion because they managed to grab the money of some of these Hollywood celebrities that obviously don't know what to do with their money, so they invested in Scientology. All
right, now. Last thing I want to ask you, people are asking this every single day. We border with Ukraine. Do you think, is there a big war coming our way or not?
I am really afraid that with the president signing this legislation authorizing lethal military aid to go to Ukraine, that we're going to see American trainers on the ground. And we know the history of trainers. First it's the trainers and then comes the military. This is the history of South Vietnam, certainly, and other places. And
what was the bill? Was the number 758, wasn't it?
Yes, right. And the latest out of Washington is that the president's signing it, even though he has reservations with it. This is going to be the next 2 years of Obama. He's going to have reservations about a lot of things the Republican Congress is going to pass, but with those reservations, he's going to sign it anyway. He's looking at post-presidency now, even though he has 2 years left, and 2 years is an awful long time when you're president of the United States. But I'm afraid we're going to see American boots on the ground in Ukraine, and we're going to possibly see situations where we're going to see Americans and Russians facing each other down and maybe being engaged in warfare, especially in eastern Ukraine. And if that happens, look, this never really happened fully during the Cold War. There might have been skirmishes we don't know about. But if we see anything like this, it's going to be on the front page of every paper in the world, on every network, and how do you back down from a military confrontation between two nuclear superpowers? It's not easily done.
Well, the question is if it's even possible, because if you back down, you lose the face, don't you?
Exactly.
So that might be really interesting. Well, we will see how it comes, how it goes. Last question is from Martin from Czech Republic. What do you what your quest mean about Pine Gap, or guest, what your guest mean about Pine Gap in connection with NSA and everything else?
Oh, I think the reference is Pine Gap as an NSA-CIA joint intelligence collection facility outside of Alice Springs in Australia. And it's basically a satellite tracking base. It also downloads data from U.S. spy satellites. It was in the news in 1975 because that year the Australian Prime Minister, who was a Labour Party man named Gough Whitlam, he just recently died at the very old age. I think he was 98. But Gough Whitlam started to ask questions like, what is this base doing here? And maybe we need to think twice about allowing this American base here. And then the CIA engineered a constitutional coup against the sitting prime minister, ousting his government, getting the Queen Elizabeth's appointed governor general in Canberra, who was basically an old CIA hand himself, a guy named John Kerr, dismissed the Whitlam government and replaced him with a conservative government that, of course, didn't ask any more questions about the Pine Gap facility. And it's been there ever since. And it's being beefed up because we know that President Obama's pivot to Asia is now increasing the U.S. military presence and the intelligence presence in Australia. So Pine Gap is not going to go away anytime soon. And the situation in Australia was incredible, where an elected government, so we talk about what happened in Kiev with the elected government of Yanukovych. But we did the same thing in Australia, which was an ally of the United States. We overthrew their prime minister and his government, and even the guy who later succeeded him, a conservative named Malcolm Fraser, later he said, oh, he still has problems with what happened. He said, absolutely, that was a CIA coup against the guy who he replaced as prime minister. So even somebody involved in it later came clean and said, yes, this was a terrible thing the United States did.
All right, Wayne, my real last question is, it just popped into my mind. There are, it's a lot of talking in our country amongst our people that, what about the Americans? What about the American nation? Can't they see what the hell is happening, around them? And I try to explain them that, the population is same like here. You've got, different kind of people, and the majority is, it's what they are. So could you just explain to our listeners how does the America see the whole thing, whatever is happening? Can they see the difference, or that there is no difference between the Democrats and the Republicans? Because here the people, they start to see that it's all the same. Is it happening over there as well?
Yes. Look, with what Obama just did, and he also did something else, giving another green light to Wall Street to commit further excesses. I mean, he governs. He's a Democrat, but he governs as a Republican in large part. The Republicans allow him his leeway on social issues as long as he keeps it down the line on the financial and political and military issues. The Republicans don't care what he does on gay marriage, for example, as long as he gives Wall Street what they want. Yeah, and there's not a whole lot of difference between these two parties, and we see that with the approaching election in 2016, where Hillary Clinton, that's more of the same, and then Jeb Bush talking about running. So here we are, maybe facing another 1992 campaign, Bush versus Clinton, except it'll be the son of George H.W. Bush and the wife of Bill Clinton. A lot of people say that's not change. That's not, and there's no difference. Knowing of the close connections between the Bush family and the Clinton family, and also some people feel that Obama himself has been very, very close to the Bush family over the years. On two occasions, Jeb Bush and his father, the aging George H.W. Bush, paid surprise visits to the White House, where they just dropped their schedule and allowed the Bushes to come in and talk to Obama, which is kind of rare when a president decides to just cancel all of his other appointments so he can see see the Jeb Bush and his father, but that happened twice. And I think this is really the people that control the United States. These people, Hillary, Obama, and the Bushes, are basically the puppets for the people who really determine not only what happens in the United States, but also in Slovakia and every country in the world.
All right, Wayne, thank you very much for coming on to the show. Our time is up. Please stay on Skype. I'd like to ask you something. And
okay.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
That was Wayne Madsen, an American journalist, and we will go into the break. Takže dáme si prestávku nejakých 7 minút a potom si dáme zase Ľuba Huďa.